So my name's Alex Bushill. I'm the head of media and PR at Mind. But yeah, in essence, we're here to try and get people to talk about mental health, talk about their own mental health, and seek help others to talk about theirs, because we know it can really change and improve lives.
Absolutely. So kind of hinted at it there. So Mind, I think, is it with Rethink Mental Health and Co-op have done some research, and so you just be able to tell us kind of a little bit about those findings and what you found.
Yeah, so basically, we surveyed around 5,000 people, which is a pretty decent number of people across England and Wales. And we were really surprised, actually, by some of the stuff that we found out from that survey. There is a view, which certainly I had, which is that people are getting better about talking about their mental health. It's becoming more normal. There's less of a stigma around it. I'm not sure that view holds anymore, if I'm honest, because this survey shows us that actually 1 in 3 of us do not make the space in our day to talk about our mental health. Now, if you do the number crunching, that would equate to around 20 million people across Britain who are not creating that space. They're either not comfortable or they're not able to talk about their mental health. And it's understandable. You know, we have all been through such a tough time. The pandemic, the cost of living crisis, you know, you turn on your TV, you put on your radio, you hear about the war in Ukraine. There is so much out there that is upsetting and takes a toll on our mental health. But that's a reason to talk about how we feel, to talk about our well-being, to talk about how we've been affected by something. It's a reason to talk more, not to talk less. And one of the really interesting stats that our research has showed us is that actually 1 in 3 of us who's not making that space in their day, creating that time to talk about mental health, is doing it because they don't want to be a burden on others, that they think everyone is struggling, so why should they add to everyone else's problems? And that's really worrying for a mental health charity, because we know that when you talk about your mental health, or indeed when you try and help others to talk about theirs, it makes a huge difference. It will allow people to feel less isolated. It'll allow them to feel supported. It will help them actively cope with where they are in that moment. And we know that it will actually help people to go out and seek support, seek help. And that in itself will transform lives. And it goes back to, I guess, this stigma that still persists amongst many of us, that actually mental health isn't as important as physical health. But ultimately, if you don't look after your mental health, you know, everything can suffer, including your physical health. So that's why we're saying, yes, it's a tough time. Yes, we know people are struggling. But if you're struggling, don't talk less, talk more.
Yeah, absolutely. And you kind of alluded to it there, but the cost of living crisis really looks to be something that's weighing on people and stopping them from having these conversations about the mental health. Is that right?
Yeah, 100%. We knew this was the case anyway. You don't have to, you know, you just need to kind of have your eyes open and listen to everyone around you and just be aware to know what a huge impact the cost of living crisis is. But it's also borne out in our survey. 80% of the people that we spoke to said that their mental health is being actively impacted by the cost of living crisis. What we found out is that of those, half are actually saying that they're having fewer conversations around their mental health. That's because, as I explained a moment ago, they don't want to burden others when they think and know that other people are struggling. And we sort of delved a little bit deeper. We try to understand, what does that actually look like in terms of how the cost of living crisis is affecting you. We found out that people can't afford to do the activities that make them happy, to support their well-being, whether that's, you know, getting in the car or getting on the bus and not being able to afford bus fares to go and see your support network, your friends, your family, or going to play in your local football game, going to your local book club, whatever it may be. Those activities are really being deprioritized, and as a result, it's really playing out in terms of people's well-being. We also know that people are doing more work, they're working more hours, they're taking on additional jobs, and we found that 25% of those that we asked said that they were doing that as a result of the cost of living crisis and the effect it has on their mental health. And then one thing I was really struck by, because we know that children and young people's mental health is in a really difficult place right now, and this may speak to children and young people and how they're experiencing the cost of living crisis, but 16% of the people we interviewed, or surveyed, I should say, said that they could no longer afford to contact people on phone, text, social media, in order to have that mental health conversation. So even if they wanted to reach out and say, you know what, I need a chat, I'm really struggling, they can't afford to, or they think they can't afford to. And that's really, really depressing, if I'm honest, because, you know, if you want to have a conversation, but you can't afford to, that's really difficult.
Do you think then the cost of living crisis has almost started to reverse what was maybe a positive trend, where you kind of think, as you said, there was becoming less of a stigma about talking about mental health? I think maybe the cost of living crisis has come along and almost flipped that, and now were we seeing progress that now we're kind of going backwards?
I don't think we can say anything definitively about whether we're going backwards. There has been huge progress in terms of the way we normalize conversations around mental health. And we know that for Times Talk Day, it is the nation's biggest mental health conversation up and down the country. There will be millions of people having conversations around mental health, talking about mental health, seeking to support others to talk about their mental health. This is a story of great progress. We know stigma has been decreasing over years, but it is a warning. It is a warning that this battle has not been won, that we do need to encourage ourselves and those around us to continue to talk about mental health. It is so important. And the good news, I guess, is that, you know, today, Thursday, there are so many different ways that you can go and have a conversation about mental health and be supported to have one. You can text a friend, speak to a family member, speak to an old mate you've lost contact with, someone that you think may be struggling. Just reach out and start that conversation with them. Up and down the country, we've got events being run by local minds and our partners, Co-op and Rethink, to try and help people to have those conversations. So, for example, in Leicester, we've got a well-being bus where you can just jump on, have a cup of tea, meet one of our volunteers, and have a chat about anything. It doesn't have to be about how tough life is. It's just having that moment of connection, knowing that you're not alone, knowing that people care and want to hear what you have to say and how you're doing. We've got wellbeing walks in Durham. So have a look at the Times Talk webpage, timestalk.co.uk. Access your local mind on the web, or give them a ring. Find out what's going on in your community, because we are running lots of events up and down the country to really try and support people to have those conversations.
Brilliant. I mean, as you can actually kind of go on to Times Talk Day, so kind of how did kind of Times Talk Day come about, and can you just maybe again expand a little bit for how important it is? And
no, besides doing Times Talk Day is the largest national mental health conversation. It's supported by our corporate partner, the Co-op, and as charities, we're working with Rethink, and it's as I say, to really just try and encourage people to create a moment in their day to talk about mental health. It could be that you're struggling. It can be that you think someone close to you could do with a kind of arm around them, just a kind of an opportunity to just stop, pause, and talk about where they're at and where you're at. So, for example, last year for Time to Talk Day, I rang an old mate of mine who's runs his own business. He was really struggling financially because of the effects of lockdown, and had a really long chat with him about where he's at, where his family's at, and I think he really benefited from it. I certainly did. It made me feel reconnected with him, as a result of which, you know, we just started chatting more and speaking more. This Times Talk Day, I'm going to be phoning my mum. I speak to her every week. I see her a lot, but it's normally just quick phone calls, quick check-ins. I'm going to create in my working day half an hour. I'm going to protect that time, and I'm going to just see how she's doing. And yes, she'll tell me my hair's too long and I don't see her enough, but that's okay. I just want to just let her know that I love her and that she lives alone. She's had a stroke recently, but that I'm here, and just create a bit more space to have something a bit more intimate. And one of the things that Times Talk Day really is helpful, I think, in providing is, if you go to the webpage, there are really helpful tips about how to have a mental health conversation. Some of us might think it's really easy, but actually our survey shows that a lot of us really feel a bit intimidated about how to have that conversation, how to handle it. And actually, to be fair, the toll it might take on you having that conversation. And there are some brilliant tips on the website, and I can give like 3 top tips now that would, I hope really help people. One of them is ask, you know, we say, how are you doing? Are you okay? Well, ask that twice. The first time you ask it, people will always say, yeah, no, I'm fine. But actually, if you ask it again, it creates an opportunity, gives permission for someone to actually say, you know what, actually, no, things are being really tough. And then from there, you can springboard to wherever they want to go to talk about whatever they want to talk. And that brings me on to my second tip. Ask questions and listen. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to fix the solution. Just listening tells them that you care, tells them that they're not alone, tells them that it matters. And that can be really, really powerful for people. And then I guess the last question, and I think we don't often think about this, is care for yourself. Having a mental health conversation where someone is telling you where they're at and what they're going through can be really tough for the person listening. So create some space afterwards if you need to go for a walk. If I've had a tough conversation with someone that I love or is really dear to me, I'll often take my dog for a walk. Just clear my head, try and decompress, because your mental health really matters too.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I quite like about those tips as well is that they're not just they cover both your own mental health, but also mental health for other people as well. You take time to look after yourself, but then also asking other people as well is it's because I imagine they're two quite different battles, aren't they? Kind of addressing mental health with yourself and then with maybe a friend or a loved one.
Yeah, I mean, certainly I think I think you do need to look after your own mental health as well, because it can be quite tiring, can be quite exhausting. Um, but please rest assured, you're doing a wonderful thing by trying to create a space for you or anyone to talk about where they're at, what they're struggling with, and we know that it really does make a difference. We know that it will help with help seeking behaviors, whether that's contacting a GP or going to the Mind Info line to have a look at what you're experiencing and what you think you're going through. It helps in terms of reaching out for more support from others. It helps you feel less isolated, and actually also it helps break down stigma still really persists around mental health, and just having conversations around stigma really shows that this does not need to be the taboo that it still is for many of us. And it goes back to that point around people not wanting to burden others. Our polling showed us that actually 23%, about a quarter of the people that we asked, said that they'd be worried if they talked about their mental health, that they'd be themselves judged or face stigma, that they were whinging or that they were being self-indulgent. And that's something that is concerning for us. It should be concerning for us as a society. It's certainly concerning for us as a mental health charity, because it means those people are suffering in silence, and that isn't good enough. We need to really break down that stigma and help people to seek help and feel less alone.
Absolutely. I think one thing on the kind of issue of mental health, one thing we have to address is maybe issues accessing mental health services. Quite a good friend of mine I saw actually yesterday on social media commented that they've been trying to get help through the NHS, but it's just not been happening because wait times are so ridiculously long at the minute. So kind of given that, has Mind seen an increase in kind of a demand for its services?
Yeah, I mean, there's lots of interesting points around that. We know that mental health services are in crisis. We know that there's a crisis in children and adolescent mental health services. We've been campaigning to try and redress that with more investment, more improvements. We know that there's 1.6 million people currently on a waiting list for mental health services, and we also know that the number of young people with a probable mental health problem has increased significantly. The latest figures are just before Christmas underline that. We've also seen at Mind on our info line a 40% increase in the number of people phoning in about financial hardship, concerned about the cost of living crisis. That's been mirrored at our partners Rethink on their website, a 55% increase. So the financial hardship is also really important in terms of some of the drivers for all of this mental health need. And actually, it's really interesting when you look and look through the numbers as to what are the subjects people are concerned about on the Mind Info line. So this is an advisory line, an information line that people can access that's run by Mind as a national service. People are expressing anxiety around bills. People are really worried that they're going to be evicted or lose their home. And they're also asking for how they can seek financial help from other charities or from the government. So yes, the cost of living crisis is really making a really difficult situation worse. But Time to Talk Day will help. It's not designed to get you up the waiting list for a mental health service, but actually we know that by talking about your mental health at whatever stage you are in terms of your mental health will help you to manage it and to cope with it. It's not a panacea, it's not a solve-all, but it really will help you manage it. And certainly, if you're just beginning to struggle, seeking help through your community, through your friends, through your family, seeking help by talking about it, speaking to the info line, whoever it may be, however you choose to do it, it is a really big and important step to supporting yourself to make sure that your mental health doesn't get worse.
What kind of steps need to be taken to kind of make sure people have a better access to mental health services?
Well, we need more investment. We need more focus from the government in particular around mental health services and, as you say, the waiting times in order to access them. We know that 1.6 million people are on a waiting list. We know that a further 8 million people would benefit from access to mental health services, but they're not deemed unwell enough. So they need to get worse before they can get better. And that isn't good enough. We were promised a 10-year full 10-year cross-government mental health plan around a year ago to address those issues and more. And that would be looking at across all sections of health, setting out a vision for the UK government departments, the NHS and wider society to address that exact issue. 28,000 people fed into that government call for evidence in order to kind of formulate that plan, but we still don't have it. And that's why we need the bold plans like that to be delivered to prevent increasing prevalence of poor mental health and that unacceptable waiting list for accessing mental health.
That's kind of the last thing I had. I mean, the only other thing is just if people really want to get more information, where can they go to find that?
So for Time to Talk Day, please look at the website. It's timetotalk.co.uk. Please, if you're on social media and you want to start a conversation on social media, please do use the hashtag #TimeToTalk. Talk about whatever it is you want to talk about. But if you use that hashtag, you'll be part of that national conversation around mental health. And finally, if I could just give a quick shout out to the Mind Info line, it's 0300 123 3393. It's a fantastic resource for information about mental health diagnosis, mental health treatments, how to access support in your community or through the NHS. And it's a really good place to go if you have any questions that you want answered. Those would be my 3 top places to go to.